I didn't find out from a confession, from rumors, or from someone else's eyes. Everything collapsed because of one bank notification that popped up on my screen while I was waiting for the gas payment to go through at the station. A small, ordinary transaction, a tiny amount, but with a description that made no sense at all. It was a payment for a hotel in a city where neither I nor she had ever been. At first, I thought it was a mistake, then fraud, then maybe some forgotten subscription. I stood there staring at the screen far too long until the cashier asked me to step aside. I stepped away, but I didn't stop looking. I kept refreshing the app over and over, hoping the line would vanish. It never did. In that moment, there was still no jealousy inside me, only irritation and a need to explain it logically. I had always been the kind of person who looks for a rational cause first. I trusted numbers, facts, the idea that any situation can be broken down into parts. We had been together for 9 years. We shared accounts, insurance, loans, vacation plans, family visits, grocery lists. We had a shared calendar, identical streaming passwords. We knew exactly who woke up when, who drank how much coffee, who always forgot to lock the car. We were a system. Systems don't break from a single line in a banking app. I sent her a short message. "Do you know what this hotel payment is?" She replied almost instantly. Too instantly. Said it was probably a charge from an old canceled booking and the money would be refunded soon. And that was when the first feeling I couldn't name appeared inside me. It wasn't distrust yet. It was mismatch. I knew her style. She always checked details. She always called the bank herself. She never wrote, "probably." That word felt foreign coming from her. I drove to work and spent the whole day staring at my screen without understanding a word of what was written there. My mind kept circling back to the same thought. If it was a canceled booking, where's the confirmation? If it's an error, why from her card? If it means nothing, why is breathing suddenly so hard? I tried to recall the last few months, searched for signs, tried to pinpoint the exact moment everything went wrong. But memory only offered ordinary scenes. Dinners together, talks about renovations, planning a trip to her parents, her laughter, her evening exhaustion, her requests to pick up milk on the way home. That evening, I said nothing. I watched. I looked at her and tried to see if she had changed. She was exactly the same. Same movements, same voice, same questions about my day. I felt like a man who knows something terrible is happening but has no right to speak it aloud. Because the moment the words leave my mouth, everything becomes real. As long as I stayed silent, we still had our normal life. The second I said it out loud, that life would end. I couldn't sleep that night. I picked up her phone. It was the first time in all those years. There was no rule against it, but there had never been a need either. I opened the transaction history. The hotel wasn't a one-time thing. There were several, different dates, always weekdays, always during working hours. Small amounts, nothing flashy, everything calculated, everything careful. I started shaking, not from anger, but from reality beginning to tear apart at the seams. I opened her email. Booking confirmations were there. Always the same second-guessed name. A man's name. I had never heard it before. I scrolled back through the emails. They started almost a year earlier. A year. A whole year of my life had been something I knew nothing about. I sat on the edge of the bed staring at the screen while she slept beside me. I listened to her breathing and realized I no longer knew who this person was. I tried to remember the days when she was supposedly at work. The "I'll be late" messages, so many tasks. Client call. How I brought her dinner when she said she was tired. How I told friends I was lucky. The most terrifying thing wasn't that she had been with someone else. The most terrifying thing was that she had lived a double life and I felt nothing. I had been right there every single day and saw nothing. I closed the phone and put it back exactly where it had been. I lay down beside her and understood I could not touch her. My body refused. One final thought shattered everything inside me. If this has lasted a year, it isn't a mistake. It's a choice. Hundreds of decisions she made while looking straight into my eyes. In the morning, she kissed me goodbye. For the first time in my life, I didn't kiss her back. That was the moment the old life ended, even though on the surface nothing had changed yet. I decided I wouldn't make a scene. I told myself that if I kept a cool head, I could get through this without total destruction. Facts were power. Gather everything first, then speak. So I started living like an observer inside my own life. I tracked dates, her return times, the way she typed messages, the way she placed her phone face down. Things I had never noticed before suddenly became the only things I saw. I checked bank statements every day. Every new transaction hit like the first one. Sometimes there were none, and on those days I felt a strange relief that immediately turned into shame. I was ashamed that I felt glad there was no betrayal, as if that was somehow a normal standard for a relationship. When I finally spoke about it, I did it as calmly as possible. I said I had seen the transactions. I said I wanted to understand, no accusations. I gave her room to explain. And that was when something began that I was completely unprepared for. She looked at me as if I had asked the strangest question in the world. Said I had misunderstood everything. Said they were corporate bookings, that she was helping a colleague who had credit issues. Said she had told me about it and I simply didn't remember. I started doubting myself almost instantly. My memory became the enemy. I tried to recall the conversation she mentioned. Rewound months, weeks, any evening we talked about work. Nothing. But she spoke with such certainty that I felt like the person destroying our relationship with paranoia. Every question I asked turned into proof of my instability. She said I had changed, that I was cold, distant. Said I had stopped trusting her and that it hurt her. Said I was looking for problems where there were none. And I started to believe her. I apologized, said it was just work stress, fatigue, anxiety. I could hear how false my own words sounded, yet I kept saying them. I stopped sleeping, woke up in the middle of the night feeling like I was falling, kept checking her phone again and again, but the discoveries no longer brought relief. Each piece of evidence only made me more lost, because during the day she convinced me nothing existed. I lived between two versions of reality. One day I saw another new transaction. That same evening she came home early, smiling, with groceries, with weekend plans. She hugged me and said she missed me. And in that instant I felt such crushing humiliation that my vision darkened, because I knew exactly where she had been a few hours earlier, and she knew I didn't know, or she knew I could never prove it. I stopped feeling anger. Only emptiness remained. I stopped asking questions. I started playing the part of someone who believes. I laughed when I was supposed to laugh. Agreed when agreement was expected. Said everything was fine. I did it not for her. I did it because I no longer had the strength to fight for a truth I was being blamed for inventing. And one night I caught myself thinking that maybe it really would be easier to believe her and forget everything I had seen, because then at least the pain would disappear. That was when I realized I had reached the bottom, not because of the betrayal itself, but because I had started betraying myself. The turning point came when I was almost ready to accept her version of reality forever. I had stopped checking statements daily, stopped searching emails, forced myself to leave her phone untouched, told myself that if I stopped digging, everything would return to normal. It felt like voluntary memory erasure. And it was exactly then that the truth found me on its own. A stranger messaged me. Short. No explanation, no emotion. Asked if we could talk. In any other period of my life, I would have ignored it. But by then I lived in constant anticipation of the next blow. I agreed almost automatically. He sent one file. Screenshots, dates, photos of entries into the same hotel. A car I recognized instantly. Hers. And text that first stole my sight, then my hearing. It was the husband of the woman she had been seeing. I hadn't even known the other person was a woman. In my head there had only been a faceless man from the booking names. Reality turned out far worse. This wasn't a casual fling. It was a full parallel relationship, two people with their own families, holidays, shared photos, future plans, all existing simultaneously alongside ours. He wrote that he wasn't looking for revenge, wrote that he too had refused to believe for a long time, wrote that he too had gone through the same gaslighting, the same words, the same accusations of paranoia, the same stories about colleagues and meetings, wrote that he didn't want me to lose my mind for as long as he had. Looking at those screenshots, for the first time, I felt a strange relief. Not because it hurt less, but because my reality had returned. I was no longer crazy. Every date matched, every late night, every big project, every unscheduled call, they all had a real place and a real person. But the most devastating part wasn't that. He sent pieces of their messages. Not everything, just fragments. And in those fragments there was no romance I had tried to imagine to soften the blow. There was ordinary life, calm, confident. They discussed convenient meeting times, planned ahead, complained to each other about being tired at home, wrote that they only felt alive on the days they could get away. Reading it, I understood that everything she told me about burnout, difficult periods, searching for herself, she had been living that with someone else. The heaviest moment came when I read her message calling me too predictable and saying that with me, everything is already decided for years ahead. There was no hatred in it, just calm, cold acceptance that I was background. In that instant, something inside me stopped forever. Panic vanished, jealousy vanished. The urgent need to clarify anything vanished. Instead came a clear, almost physical realization. I no longer existed in the life I thought was mine. I wrote back to that man only one thing. I thanked him. After that, I closed every file and understood I finally had a choice. Not between believing or disbelieving, but between continuing to live as someone who can be convinced of any version of reality, or stepping completely out of this story. For the first time in a long time, I felt not pain, but control. The hardest part was not discovering the truth. It was accepting a decision that could never be undone. Until then, I had always clung to the illusion that we could go back, find the right words, ask the perfect question, wait for her to break and give me a human confession that would make it all slightly bearable. But after those files, the need for confession disappeared. I understood it would change nothing. Everything had already happened hundreds of times without me. For several days, I lived as if nothing had happened. I looked at her and saw not the person I had spent nearly a third of my life with, but a parallel system running alongside me. I noticed how she scheduled days, checked the time, typed messages when she thought I wasn't looking. I stopped searching for emotion in her face. It felt like watching a mechanism that once seemed alive. I prepared in silence, gathered documents, opened a separate account, spoke to a lawyer during lunch break, sitting in my car with shaking hands as I said the word divorce out loud for the first time. It sounded alien, like it belonged to someone else's life. One evening she talked about vacation plans, dates, tickets, how we finally needed time just the two of us. And in that moment, I realized she wasn't saying it because she believed it. She was saying it because that's what the role required. We were both playing parts. Two people pretending at a relationship to keep the familiar structure from collapsing. I understood that if I did nothing now, I would stay in this for years. Not because I loved her, but because I was afraid to change my life. That day I didn't raise my voice, didn't show her the files, didn't list facts. I simply said I was leaving. No accusations, no explanations. Said I knew enough and didn't want to discuss versions of reality anymore. She tried to speak, first calmly, then faster, then emotionally. Said I had misunderstood, that I was destroying our family, that I was deciding on emotion, that we could fix everything. And for the first time, I felt nothing but exhaustion. No desire to argue, no desire to prove anything. I understood explanations were part of the old game. The most painful thing wasn't the conversation. It was the moment I took my keys and realized this was the last time I would walk out of that house as someone who lived there. 9 years reduced to a few boxes and a folder of papers. And with it came a strange shame. Shame that I couldn't save it. Shame that I was leaving. Shame that I had become the one who officially destroyed everything, even though I hadn't started it. When I closed the door behind me, there was no victory, no relief. Only silence inside and the understanding that from now on I would live with the consequences of my choice. No familiar schedule. No person I shared everything with. No role. But along with that emptiness came something absent for a very long time. The feeling of my own weight. My decisions belonged to me again. The strangest part began afterward, when everything was formally over. There was no final full stop, no moment when I could say the story was closed. Just documents, signatures, divided accounts, address change notifications, awkward messages from people pretending they didn't know, but they did. For the first weeks, I woke up feeling like I was late getting home. In my head, the old place still existed, where someone waited, where there was a shared to-do list, where I needed to buy groceries on the way. Then the realization hit that it no longer did, and each time it struck as hard as the first day. People wanted simple labels. They asked what happened, expected a short answer, affair, divorce, rough patch. Any of those phrases was convenient, but none captured what really occurred. Because it wasn't about the fact of infidelity. It was about living beside someone for years and never seeing their real life. And even more terrifying, never seeing myself slowly disappearing from my own. Sometime later, I met that man. We sat across from each other looking like two people accidentally bound by the same disaster. We didn't discuss details. There was no point. Everything worth knowing we already knew. But sitting there, I felt for the first time that my story wasn't unique or a personal failure. It was a system. Two people who chose double lives, and two who chose to believe. The hardest thing wasn't forgiving her. It was stopping blaming myself. For a long time, a voice inside insisted I should have noticed earlier, paid more attention, asked better questions. That thought was comfortable because it gave the illusion of control. If I was at fault, then next time I could prevent it. Admitting you cannot control another person's choice is far more difficult. Gradually, life began filling with other things. New routines, different routes. Silence that first felt like emptiness and later like space. I started making decisions without checking someone else's schedule. Started rediscovering what I liked, because before everything had been discussed and agreed upon. It wasn't happiness in the usual sense. It was returning to myself with no guarantees. The most difficult question that still remains isn't about her. It's about me. I still don't know what is more frightening. Living inside a stability that turned out to be an illusion, or living on knowing any person can lead a double life for years and you might never see it. I used to believe trust was the foundation. Now I know trust is a choice you make while fully aware of the risk. Sometimes I imagine what would have happened if I had accepted her version and stayed. Maybe on the surface, everything would have looked calm. Joint trips, shared photos, holidays with family, and somewhere parallel, another life I would have tried not to think about. That possibility scares me far more than being alone. I didn't become stronger in the way people like to talk about. I didn't stop being afraid. I didn't stop doubting people. But I did stop ignoring myself. And that is the only thing I truly carried out of this story. Right now, the only dilemma I have left, and I still have no answer for it, is this. If love can coexist with lies for years, if a person can split life into two parallel realities and sincerely feel justified, then what should we even call real relationships? The years we lived together that felt completely real to me? Or the truth that destroyed them? And if for one of us it was genuine, while for the other it was merely a convenient part of life, does that mean there was never anything real at all? Or did something real exist, but only in my version?